Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hallowed Be Thy Game. Ren here, and if you're a fan of RPGs and general discussions about the games we all know and love, then you've definitely found a friend in this channel. I post at least once a week on topics from pickup videos, new releases, to just chatting about the games that have reached hallowed status in my heart. So thank you so much for watching, and today I'm sharing my thoughts on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Let's check it out. I do want to give a spoiler warning before today's episode. You'll be seeing footage from about the first half of Final Fantasy VII Remake, so if you haven't beaten the remake yet, or you care about differences between it and the original, then proceed with caution. So with that out of the way, let's get into the episode. The characters of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Square Enix took a lot of risk in remaking one of the most beloved video games of all time. Love or hate Final Fantasy VII, there is a fandom around this that is its own kind of behemoth. Walking the fine line of refining parts of the original that would not translate well to modern audiences while still keeping the original essence of the game must have been like traversing a razor's edge. When I think about the entirety of Final Fantasy VII and what means the most to me personally, it is undoubtedly the characters. Tifa, Aerith, Barret, and Cloud comprise the majority of who you'll be teaming up with throughout the story, and I can say with the utmost certainty that Square Enix knocked it out of the park. These are exactly how I imagined the characters to sound and act from when I was a kid. One of my absolute favorite things about this game is that the moments between fighting when you're traversing from location to location and the dialogue and banter that happen between the characters. It makes them real, and it gives life to these characters that we've known for so long. Kudos to Square, because I really believe they hit the nail on the head when it comes to giving personality to these characters. In the original FF7, we get a glimpse into what comprises these characters, but with Advent Children and other video games, we have formed existing ideas of how characters would probably sound or chat with one another. There's a shocking amount of voice acting in this game, and I know this is a controversial issue, but they absolutely clinched it. Barret did a phenomenal job, but literally the entire cast is superbly done. I want to take a moment and cover in more detail about my thoughts on each character's development. Cloud is the main protagonist of FF7, and I feel like he has gotten a lot of crap over the years for being too edgy or brooding of a main character. I feel like a lot of this is due in part to how lovable Zack was from the Crisis Core game. Zack was an altruistic, hopeful character that had a bright future ahead of him. Aerith and him were a beautiful match, and his heroic death was soul-crushing to behold. So I feel there's a lot that causes people to just not like Cloud. And I'll be honest, and I'm sure it is nostalgia or the angsty teenager still inside my soul, but I love Cloud. However, I will say FF7 Remake takes Cloud on a glorious character development arc. It is done with such subtlety and grace. Seeing Cloud start as a hard case with a traumatic past and damaged goods type of feel is very endearing. It is heartbreaking at times to see this combat vet, who is clearly suffering from a form of PTSD, reacclimate himself to civilian life. The interactions Cloud has between Avalanche and Tifa is especially of note to me. Cloud is a killing machine, but it is so clear that over the course of the game we witness his brutal exterior begin to crack. The moments of quiet discussion between Cloud and Aerith while they're at Wall Market also touched my heart. We see Cloud begin to have fun with Aerith, and the whole high five bit was super cute and I loved every minute of it. I will give the caveat that I am a Cloud and Tifa shipper when it comes to the romantic interest in the game, but the way Cloud's relationship is balanced between both female love interests is extremely well done. Tifa is such a strong character, and the writing team definitely worked with the combat design to incorporate her essence into her combat style. I loved how developed she was as a character, and her interactions with Cloud helped to humanize him while simultaneously showing her virtuous nature and enduring spirit. She is definitely the moral compass for Avalanche, and honestly, her trepidation to follow through with the plan creates such a believability to how high the stakes are. She introduces the concept of, do the ends justify the means when Avalanche is trying to save the planet? Her loving and nurturing nature for Marlene and Cloud to an extent just put her fighting spirit on display. Barrett is probably the most surprising in terms of character development. When we are introduced to him, he feels larger than life, he's hilarious, and just as over the top as you would imagine him to be. However, his emotional grounding and where his true beauty as a character comes from is his relationship with his daughter, Marlene. When the plate falls and Barrett doesn't know if Marlene has lived or died, the desperation in his voice and his willingness to almost barter with Cloud to tell him the truth, it was shockingly relatable. I'll admit that this part of the game had me to tears, and my love for Barrett somehow found a way to deepen even further. It was a powerful moment, and one of the reasons why Barrett is such an incredibly loved character. His leadership style, care, and compassion for Avalanche is amazing. The members of Avalanche have superb voice actors. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse, they're so lovable. And for those of us who have played the original and know what happens to them, it's gut-wrenching when we get to share in the little moments of dialogue with them. Their characters are so much more fleshed out, and the buy-in to wanting to save them is real. All three voice actors are commendable, but Wedge is a special shout-out for me. Matt Jones was the perfect fit, and he is so lovable and goofy in his delivery for Wedge. There is not a single voice actor that I don't think hit their role out of Sector 7. Aerith is just as quirky as I hoped she would be. Also, in terms of tear-jerking moments, the opening of the game where we see her and the camera does that glorious zoom out to the title screen, it drew the first tear I would shed in this game. The attention to detail with the characters is on point. The simple inclusion of showing materia on the weapons was a completely unnecessary detail, but it was greatly appreciated. Maybe I've just been playing older games for too long, but I enjoyed that the current weapon and materia are featured in all cutscenes with the characters. Kudos to the developers. The music of Final Fantasy VII Remake. The soundtrack to the original FF7 is a strong contender for one of the best video game soundtracks ever made. Nobu Uematsu is a genius, plain and simple. Even if someone may not consider FF7 to be their favorite Final Fantasy, I think everyone can agree that some of the most iconic character themes and songs from FF7 are instantly identifiable in a masterclass performance. Aerith's theme will forever be one of my favorite songs ever created. The remastered soundtrack is jaw-dropping. The rearranging of the original tracks pays perfect homage to the original piece, but presents it in a mesmerizing way. The themes are the ideal coupling to the story presentation, and the familiarity yet heartwarming delivery solidify complete nostalgic immersion. This game is a tsunami of nostalgia with Leviathan-scale proportions. Let it wash over you, my friends. The memories of playing this game with my brothers about 20 years ago were stifling at times, and it was a glorious walk down memory lane. The music serenades you on this journey, and it is, without doubt, one of the best soundtracks to come out this year, and please don't make me choose between this or Persona 5 Royal. Shout out to Barrett's victory fanfare, which made me audibly laugh out loud every time. I love this game. The story of Final Fantasy VII Remake. The story of FF7 Remake is just the Midgar section of the original story. I'll admit, I was a little leery initially as I was concerned that we would be looking at potentially 10 years waiting for the remake to be fully released with about 5 or so games under its belt. I know I have heard the developers stress that the rest of the game will not be as expanded as the Midgar section was, so heading into the remake, I wondered how that would pan out. I'll be honest, I love this game and the story is expanded, but when I think about it, Midgar is what sets our heroes on their epic quest to save the planet. If any section of the original story could have been expanded and give more life, it would have been Midgar. I know people have criticized this game for being linear, but the original was too. However, late in the game, Midgar does open up to explore freely in the late game, and it is impressive. The emotional impact of Aerith's mother and Cloud's conversation was shocking. That scene where Cloud loses himself in helping Aerith, a summer child, and helping the town. Then for a moment, he begins to lower his guard, only for Aerith's mother to remind him of what he is and what he has become. Cloud's great struggle is that in the end, I believe he feels as though he does not deserve to live a life, but instead he has to give up his life for those he cares about. The silent hero, the one whose song is sung by those who have never met him and never knew him. I think FF7 Remake does a phenomenal job of showing the desperation of the characters and giving them ample reason to set out on the grand adventure that will be the rest of the remake. I loved it. Midgard feels alive, and the story shows the dark and grittier side of FF7 that we could only imagine when we were younger on the PS1. I thought that the Time Ghost would be a tacked-on addition that would eventually get on my nerves, but to be honest, they didn't. If anything, I think they served a decent amount of stress for fans of the original, that something might change, or we may be able to save someone who had died in the original. I can say that if you love the original, you have nothing to fear of the remake. This is still the story you fell in love with, and don't let the internet haters dissuade you from this incredible game. The story's pacing is well done, and even though I had some complaints about the sections that felt a little dragged out, in particular, one would be moments of dialogue where you're squeezing through rubble or forced to walk. I could see where people would have some annoyance with this, but speaking as a fan and admitting my perception does have a hardcore fandom tinting to it, I love these moments. I love the banter and the moments to take a breath and take in the eerie beauty of Midgar, or get to know the characters more as we traverse the sectors. The layout for each chapter does a seamless job of foreshadowing which boss you'll be fighting, and the build-up and tension that leads to these intoxicating crescendos where the boss is introduced. I thought all bosses had great designs, none felt too throwaway, and some were far harder than others. Looking at you, Hell House. Yeezus! But they were all fun to fight. The combat of FF7 Remake. I want to begin with the caveat that I have not played a mainline entry of Final Fantasy since 10. I would classify myself as a major fan of Final Fantasy XIV, and I do plan to play 12 this year on the Switch. However, 15 just did not appeal to me, and I had heard some good things, so I'm sure I'll try it out eventually. But FF7R is my first game with a more action RPG-centered combat. I'll be honest, the fighting owns. I would highly recommend this to a combat purist for action RPGs because it feels unique and polished. The implementation of the top-tier materia system is seamless into combat. The materia options are impactful and offer an incredibly diverse way to build your team. Also, as painful as it was to unequip the Buster Sword for Cloud, the upgrade and customization system for weapons is ace. Each weapon will have a unique skill that when used enough will be mastered by the party member, and then they'll be able to use that with any other weapon equipped. This is such a satisfying and useful system. It encourages you to unknowingly switch between your party members to ensure that they are learning their unique weapons and teaching them while also helping to guide the combat flow. Switching between party members is paramount to success in this game, and honestly, this game's normal difficulty is no cakewalk. I love challenging games, and I will say this game's normal difficulty never reaches unfun levels. Still, I think it is just the right balancing to help push players to improve and utilize their party's full capabilities. The min-maxing opportunity in this game is very advantageous, and it offers plenty of opportunity to reach higher skill ceilings. I love combat systems that are both approachable yet offer depth for study. FF7R achieves that in spades. The summoning system is epic, yet implemented in a way that doesn't break the game. Busting out that fat chocobo, Ifrit, or Shiva rocks, and it is fun as all get out. And seeing them in their gigantic models makes you feel like you're in a titanic clash. I'm super impressed with Final Fantasy VII's combat. And even if you were never a fan of the original, at the very least, this game has an entertaining combat system to check out. Also, there was a point in this game where I used a Phoenix Down to kill a baddie. That, my friends, is friggin' amazing. The negatives of Final Fantasy VII Remake. My negatives would be that after a while, I got tired of squeezing through nooks and crannies. They always felt just long enough to get old. Also, when I was getting my butt kicked with the Pro Pull-Up Challenge, enjoyable, but not easy for me, the load times to try again felt a little long. Again, super nitpicky gripes, but I think it lends credence to how much this game was fun to play. It doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while, the game is structured to where your party will not have a ranged fighter, and you'll be pitted against a flying enemy. It is never a boss or anything like that, but it was annoying to have to do aerial combat with just Cloud or Tifa, when I didn't have access to Barret or Aerith. This may have happened like 2 or 3 times throughout the entire game, so very rare, but let me tell you, when it happens, it is very noticeable. My positives with Final Fantasy VII Remake are without question characters. Oh my gosh, Square crushed it by bringing the most beloved party members alive with pristine voice acting and character designs. Each member's combat styles were flawlessly representative of how they were in the original, while having some pizzazz and style to back it up. The combat is super satisfying and epic. The upgrade system and UI are top notch. The story is expanded and stays faithful to the original. The game is emotionally gripping and has moments of laughter, victory, defeat, and tear-jerking moments that stay with you long after beating it. My nitpicking score is a 9 out of 10, but I do want to say that as a fan of this game, it is a 10 out of 10 for me in my super fan heart. My final thoughts on this game, it crushed it. The entire package feels AAA, and it feels like die-hard fans made it. From the characters to the combat, the game is such a complete package and has me more psyched than ever to experience the rest of the story. In the quiet moments of the game where the mesmerizing Nobuo Uematsu soundtrack is playing, it's almost like a lullaby from your youth, and the angry swing of the Buster Sword is a reminder of the cruelty of combat. Final Fantasy VII carries elements that center on the concept of death. I am no English major, but the cycle of life and death is a crucial component for this entry. Learning to cope with that cycle and say goodbye to the ones we love is what resonated with me as a kid. And now, so many years later, it hits even closer to home as we learn to say goodbye to the ones we love on this side of eternity. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching to the end of today's video. Have you played the Final Fantasy VII Remake? If so, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. I'd love to read about it. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so we can hang out again in the future. And until then, I'll see you guys next time.